I tried uploading the first video and it was taking forever. I don't understand why it takes so long for a 15-minute video to upload. So I canceled it. So I was gonna make the I'm gonna read the second half of chapter one, Walls of Destiny, and I'm gonna try to upload it tonight when everyone's sleeping. Because it takes up all the internet in the house and you can't do anything while it's uploading. So it's just kind of ridiculous. So here's the second half. I think this is where I left off. In the old mining village of Grable, a handful of people boarded and some disembarked. It was still about 500 miles to the walled city of Adriaxlin, where Milo would eventually exit the train for the last time. Taking advantage of the brief stop, Milo stepped off the train and inhaled the dry, dusty air. He walked north along the main road, not far from the train, where the ox and pick supply shop stood. Memories flooded back of his father, the refreshing water from the shop after a day of playing around in the mine, and campfire stories of adventure and buried treasure, of gems and rare metals. These nostalgic thoughts invigorated him, filling him with renewed resolve and excitement for the adventures ahead. Milo's gaze was irresistibly drawn to the road leading to the mine. Almost unconsciously, he began walking toward it, captivated by its mystery. Just as he neared the mine, the train horn blared, signaling its departure. Milo, snapping Milo from his trance. Reluctantly, he turned back and hurried to the train. "All aboard!" called the engineer, and with a jolt and puff of smoke, the train started moving once more. Normally, the train would make one more stop at the city of River's Edge, the last station before entering Camaria's central region of Midlandia. However, recent attacks by fearsome waterfowler had made a stop there too dangerous. "Do you see any waterfowler?" said one person, as he raced to the window and gawked through it. "Will they attack the train?" asked an anxious woman. Everyone, including Milo, looked out the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the beasts. However, the only thing that could be seen from the train was an overturned wagon and a good number of soldiers armed with crossbows and long spears. As the train passed through River's Edge, the excitement shifted from the threat of the waterfowler to the anticipation of crossing the mighty River Orlac, which marked the boundary between the western lands and Atlantia. Milo's heart raced with anticipation as the train crossed the bridge. This was the farthest away from home that he had ever been. Though many on board were likely feeling the same thrill, they kept their excitement subdued. The looming transition to Ashdorn, the land of ash and ancient volcanic activity, intrigued Milo. The once barren wasteland was known for its inhospitable conditions, but it was also the gateway to new adventures. After passing through Ashdorn, the landscape gradually transformed from a flat rocky wasteland dotted with sparse yellow-green grass to lush mountain forests. The mountains seemed to grow larger with each passing mile, towering over Milo with a grandeur he had never before witnessed. Beyond these southern peaks lay the land of untold horrors and abominations, according to local lore. As the journey wore on, restlessness began to set in among the passengers. Games had lost their charms, legs grew cramped, and the air was thick with the stench of pipe and cigar smoke and sweat. Some travelers indulged in alcoholic beverages to pass the time. Even Milo, who seldom drank, took a glass or two of beer. Though he typically avoided conversation with strangers, the alcohol lowered his guard enough to chat with those seated around him. And at the front of the train car, a group started singing a well-known song from their school days. The tune, sung with varying degrees of sarcasm, enthusiasm, and boredom, was one that Milo always found irksome. In the lands of old where tongues did clash, King Ariad arose with courage to smash. He forged a bond neath one shared tongue, a realm of unity where all belong. With steady hand and fearless might, he built anew, neath day and night, His stature tall, his heart so brave. Ariad's name our lands shall save. In Chimeria's light we stand as one, beneath the gaze of the morning sun. With every beat of our united heart, we sing the praises of our king's noble art. Through walled cities strong we thrive and soar, defending against the southern roar. King Ariad's legacy forever shall stand, a beacon of hope throughout our land. Cheers to adventure, cheers to treasure, and to friendship, the rowdy bunch toasted, their voices ringing with joviality. Milo shared their enthusiasm for the journey and the walled city, but the song's exaggerated praises made him want to spit out his beer. The remaining hours of the journey seemed inter- interminable. That must be a word that AI gave me, because I wouldn't have ever used that word. Anyway, though the passing landscapes were undeniably breathtaking. There were three more stops before reaching Adriaxlin. The first was at Doka, the capital of the United Lands of Chimeria, situated on the nebulous border between Ashtorn and central Midlandia. Two imposing men dressed in black, their faces obscured by their wide-brimmed hats, disembarked from the train. They exchanged a mysterious package with the third man who boarded the train with it. Rumors about the package and the shadowy figures quickly spread among the restless passengers, becoming the latest topic of fascination. Milo passed the time by drifting in and out of sleep, his wary mind plagued by strange dreams and disjointed images. Tensions ran high on the train, and about a half an hour before his stop, he was jolted awake by a fist fight somewhere near the middle of the train car over a spilled glass of water. The altercation was quickly quelled with no injuries, prompting Milo to think, there's always somebody. Most of the remaining passengers were bound for the walled city, and the air buzzed with their relief. Not much longer now, one man said, while another added, I thought I'd go mad. Milo shared their sentiments. Feeling a surge of anticipation at the threshold of a new chapter of his life, his mind raced with thoughts of the future. He glanced down at his boots to steady himself. Focus, Milo, he said to himself as he pulled out a city map and began plotting where to seek work and find accommodations. The train came to a gradual stop. Last stop before Railsville, announced the driver. Railsville was where the tracks destined for Atlantia were constructed and maintained. Milo had read extensively about Railsville and had often imagined himself working on the old trains there, although only those with top security clearances could access her panels and inner workings. Rumors spoke of a dwarf-like race, the Baruni, who had built the trains. According to lore, the last of them perished over 100 years ago due to their dwindling numbers, a result of the Great Plague that swept across the land centuries earlier. But there were always claims of sightings in the wilderness. The Baruni were known for their exceptional engineering skills and love for gems and precious metal, their skills surpassing even the wisest of wizards. Their abandoned mines and mountain fortresses were said to be ripe for exploration by daring adventurers. Milo arrived in Adriaxis Pass, a small village suburb of Adriaxlin, set up primarily to profit from naive travelers. The air was thick with the smell of smoky grilled meats and baking bread. The narrow, dusty streets echoed with the chatter of sales pitches and promises of bargains from food stalls, weaponsmiths, and gift shops. A main path ran east to west alongside the railroad, with another leading south into the lowlands. Shifty-eyed beggars, sinister-looking brigands loitered at every corner. Most travelers clubbed together in small groups, and Milo felt exposed as he surveyed the stark reality of the village. The warmth and friendliness of the countryside he once cherished seemed a distant memory. He hoped the walled city would offer a more welcoming atmosphere. Hunger gnawed at him, outweighing his better judgment to keep moving north toward the city. The wind seemed to conspire with the vendors, directing the enticing aromas of exotic cuisines toward hungry travelers. As Milo approached the east-west road to cross, he narrowly avoided being trampled by a speeding camel. The beast's dust and wind hit him as the driver shouted, "Are you blind?" Stunned, Milo paused to collect himself, then looked both ways twice before crossing the dusty road toward the source of the tempting smells. At the food stand, Milo knew the prices were inflated, but the vendors knew that if you were hungry enough, you would pay the price. He approached the safest looking vendor and studied the menu with an air of calm, to make it seem as though he was less desperate for sustenance. Finally, he ordered, "I'll take 2 beef kebabs, please." "That'll be 10 cedros," the vendor said, barely looking up from his grill. "But the sign says 2 kebabs for 8, Milo pointed out. "That was yesterday's deal. Fran must have forgotten to take down the sign. Today's price is 2 for 10, the vendor replied with impatience. Frustration bubbled within Milo. "I'll give you 9 cedros, and you might want to remove that sign," he said, his irritation evident. The vendor glanced around nervously before accepting the offer. "Fine, 9 cedros." He handed Milo a bag with the food, casting wary glances at the surrounding crowd. Milo moved to a nearby well to enjoy his meal, but recoiled at the sulfuric stench emanating from it. "No, thank you," he muttered, opting instead to drink from the small supply of water he had with him. He acknowledged the simultaneous tension and fatigue in his body and slumped himself back, leaning on the wall. He took a deep breath and prepared to eat. Before he could take a bite, he felt a presence next to him, in a dry, slurred voice. "You there! You have stolen my horse," said a scruffy, dirty-looking man as he swayed drunkenly. "I saw you sneaking around the stables." "Excuse me?" asked Milo. "I say, you stole my horse," repeated the intoxicated fellow. "I haven't stolen anything. I have just arrived here," said Milo. "Yeah, I think you did," said the man. "No, sir," said Milo nervously. The man moved closer to Milo until their noses were nearly touching. "Yeah," he said, as he breathed his alcohol-permeated breath into Milo's face. Milo was confused. He wasn't sure what to do. He slowly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. The man didn't seem like the type to be reasoned with, but Milo had never had to use a sword in combat before. He wasn't even sure if he had it in him to do so. "I need the horse," continued the man in a slur. "But I don't," began Milo, before 2 men came up behind the drunkard and ushered him away. "No one stole your horse, Phineas. You're drunk. Your horse is right where you left him," said one of the men as they left. Milo breathed a sigh of relief as the distant echo of the drunkard's protesting faded into the background. As Milo tried to process what had just happened, he looked around and realized that a sizable number of villagers had been watching the incident and seemed to be disappointed that no real action had taken place. He reached down to grab his bags and realized he dropped one of the overpriced kebabs in the sand. The stench of the drunken man still hung in the air, and Milo was no longer in the mood to eat anyway. He slung his bag over his shoulder and headed northward, marching toward his destination. A toothless old man wearing a farmer hat and dirty, tattered brown clothes, leaning on an old wooden post, eyed Milo as he walked. He tipped his hat to Milo as he spoke in a high, reedy voice. "Hey, you there, young man. You are new here, aren't you?" said the old-timer. "Yes, sir," he answered, pausing and halfway turning to look at the man. "I've lived in these parts my whole life," began the old man. "I know the land well. You might say I'm a sort of a guide. I can safely get you where you need to go around here, and for a very fair price." "No, thank you," said Milo cautiously. "I know where I'm going." Milo continued north, and the man followed, still trying to convince Milo that he needed his services. "That you may, Sunshine, that you may, but let me warn you, best get there before dark. Why, just last night, a pack of adolescent moss lurkers were spotted not far from here. from where we stand. Fierce creatures they are, unless you know how to handle them," warned the man as he made a crushing motion with his fist. Realizing that Milo wouldn't be using his services, the old man stopped walking and offered a last bit of advice. "Whiskey spiders and bothersome critters come out at night as well," he said, raising his voice to compensate for the distance Milo was putting between them. "Do be careful. Good luck, friend." Milo slightly raised his arm, barely looking back, gave a brief thanks, and kept on moving. The road going north soon turned into a 20-foot wide, neatly maintained trail, with one side for horses and wagons and the other side the footpath. The trail cut through a forest thinly filled with rows of beautiful, well manicured evergreen trees. It was pleasant. It was a pleasant hike, except for the mild uphill grade, which was intentionally built up because the walled city was built high upon a hill for protection during those turbulent times of war. Thankfully, those days were gone, and the longer, less steep grade made it much more convenient for merchants and tourists to access the city. There were a few others on the trail. One or two of them Milo thought he'd recognize from the train, but they were a bit too far away to be certain. "It isn't safe to venture out by oneself," sounded a voice from behind. Startling Milo. Milo whirled around to see if the surprise warning was meant for him. He saw a friendly, smiling face who had a similar build and features as himself. Looking at him, which reminded him of an uncle he had, or rather a friend of his father's who referred to himself as Milo's uncle. "Thomas R. Tillman is the name," said the man in a familiar Atlantean accent. "Milo T. Cobb," replied Milo with a smile, as they continued on the path. "Ah, this is your first time going to the walled city, I presume," said Thomas confidently. Milo nodded and glanced briefly at the man. A man driving a large horse, pulling a wagon, trotted past them and waved before heading east on a narrow path ahead. "Correct," said Milo. He noticed that Thomas's eyes were fixed on the horse and wagon that passed them. "I have come here mainly to find work. I'm a—" Thomas interrupted, apparently not interested in Milo's mission. Do you know how long I've lived here?" he asked, as he broke his gaze from the direction of the horse and wagon. Wow, we're at 18 minutes. It's taken longer than I thought to read this. Taken by surprise by the strange question, Milo replied, "No, how long?" "Almost 5 years," he continued. "For the first 3, everything's pretty normal. But things are becoming ever different here." Thomas scratched his head and seemed to be looking around for something. "Yes, different," he whispered. He took a long pause and spoke. "I'm not sure what's going on, but there have been a lot of strange goings on in these lands recently." Milo was perplexed by the instant change in the man's behavior, but was curious to see what he meant. "Strange?" Thomas looked behind him, then to each side to see if anybody might be listening. "Strange folk, Doka agents, the secrecy, it's all becoming strange. They are up to something, those in charge. Something big." There was a long silence between them, and Milo began to wonder if the man was sane. Perhaps Thomas had been away from home too long, or maybe too long by himself. Milo breathed in the fresh pine air surrounding him, and denied any possibility that he could become like Thomas. Thomas wasn't done with the monologue. It could have something to do with the missing princess of Westwood, or maybe the discord between the COL and Tyrovent. He rambled on and on. Milo wasn't familiar with Midlandian current events, and was not remotely prepared for such topics of discussion, so he kept silent and tried to follow the paranoid rant. Voices and commotion could be heard up ahead, coming from a clearing as they got closer. The mighty walls began to emerge, Milo stopped in his tracks, just staring ahead in awe. Thomas, however, kept his pace, continuing his rant, not even realizing he was speaking to no one. By the time Milo got over his astonishment and started walking again, Thomas was about 50 feet ahead and finally realized that he had left Milo behind. He looked back and waved and spoke a final, inaudible word to Milo before disappearing into the northwest. Milo continued toward the city. It was a spectacular sight. The bright green and yellow walls were at least 40 feet in height, with turrets being another 20 feet high. At the top of the walls was a walkway encircling the city. Guards could be seen on the walkway, dutifully observing the activity below. Inside the city were some of the tallest buildings in all Cameria. 3, which could be seen from outside the city walls, were 8 stories tall at their tallest point. Milo came to the southern gate, and the guard was there on duty, checking people in. Sign here sign here after you have read the Adriaxan Code of Conduct, instructed the guard. If you can't read, someone can read it for you, he reluctantly added. Milo did as instructed and was permitted to pass. He made his way north from the south road. He passed a small horse stable to his right, which smelled as though it could use a cleaning. Across from the stable to the left sat a neatly kept field of short green grass that looked as if it was used as some sort of for sporting event of some kind. A bit further ahead on his left stood the famous Great Library of Adriaxlan. The stone building stood about 4 stories tall, with 2 of the turrets at 6 stories each. The turrets were capped with blue pointed roofs. Its lawn was pristinely manicured with fruit trees and topiaries and flower gardens. The great library was known throughout all Cameria and was said to contain every book ever written in the lands. He had always wanted to visit the great library, since he heard about it as a young child. And now it was there in front of him. But it would have to wait for another day. More pressing matters were at hand. Night was soon coming, and the curfew was in effect for all non-citizens. As he walked along the northern path, it seemed to run slightly to the right. Milo paused, scratched his head, and reached into his pack for the city map. He felt around for it, but it wasn't there at all. He spotted a nearby bench and sat to do a more thorough search. He quickly realized that not only his map was gone, but his wallet as well. He began to panic. Did it fall out of my pack, he wondered? Did I set it down somewhere? He thought about going back to look for it in the morning, but if he did leave it somewhere, it would surely be gone by then. Most of the people who he encountered so far didn't look like the type who would try to find the rightful owner of any lost property. Milo had never been so careless as to lose property, especially at a time like this. He became convinced that someone must have robbed him. But who? Maybe it was that crazy Atlantean Thomas, or the old man, or maybe the drunkard. Yes, maybe him. Maybe that little scene was a setup to distract me, he thought. His heart sank as he realized his predicament. Whatever happened to his wallet didn't matter. It was gone. Over 700 Cedros were lost. All that he had left was about 30 Cedros and a few Atlantean gold pieces that he had in his wallet. Hopefully, it would be enough to get him a room for the night and a meal or two. "Excuse me, sir, can you point me in the direction of an inn?" he asked, a dark-skinned man in brightly colored clothing. The man only responded with a cautious stare and ushered his family past Milo. Milo saw a young man and crossed the road and approached him. "I am looking for a lodging for the night." The young man quickly uttered something in another language and kept walking. Everyone seemed to be too busy or just didn't want to help him. He began to despair as he passed another gate that led outside the wall's protection. The last thing he thought would happen is that he would have to sleep outside of the city on his very first night there. Darkness started to fall over the city, but the many torches set up nearly on every street fought off the night. Curfew was coming. Fearing that he might get lost if he went further in, he found the nearest bench and sat and tried to figure out his next move. I'll have to sleep outside. It's okay, he thought. I will find a tree to sleep under and start a fire and come back in the morning. Just then he looked up to see a sign right across the road. A handcrafted wooden sign beckoned to him. Vacancy, the sign read. It was a motel. He got up as fast as he could and hurriedly walked through the door. How much for one night? He asked the innkeeper. 25 cedros, replied the man. Oh, you're an Atlantean. Where do you hail from? He said, recognizing Milo's features. Goodfield, just outside of Finlark, Milo answered. I have a cousin from there. My family and I were nomads back in Green Harvest when we moved out here when I was 8 years old. Do you know any of the Potters? That is a common name, but I can't say I know any personally. Ah, well, now you do, said the innkeeper with a grin. I will tell you what. Since it is late, and you seem to be a good, upstanding Atlantean citizen, the room is yours for 15 cedros. Oh, thank you so much, said Milo as he paid. Glad to help. Anyway, I was just about to close and wouldn't have made any money on it tonight. It is room number 4, right down the hall, just to the left. Now go, get some rest. You look like you could use it. Milo walked into the sparsely decorated room, immediately noticing a musty odor indicating that the roof had probably leaked at some point. There was an old bed and one chair and a plain desk with only 2 drawers up against a window. He sank down in the chair and stared outside the city. It seemed so quiet. Only a few people were out and about by now. What appeared to be a city guard on horseback seemed to peer in at him through the window as he slowly rode by. Milo continued to look out the window and dream about his future until finally dozing off. The obnoxious blare of the curfew horn nearly startled Milo out of his seat. He realized what the noise was and gave thanks that he was hearing it in here instead of outside. For the rest of the night, Milo wrote in his journal, something he hadn't done for quite a while. With a few hours left before dawn, he fell asleep in the chair and slept until he was woken up by the vibrant vitality of the city folk starting their day. He awoke undeterred by the loss of his money. He got himself ready and grabbed his things and left his plain little room. He grabbed a paper map of the city from the lobby and said goodbye to Mr. Potter, who never did tell Milo his first name. The city was already alive with activity by the time Milo eagerly set off to find work. There were merchants and farmers and some on horseback, some hauling their goods to marketplaces. The sound of conversation and laughter coursed through the roads and alleyways. There were new scents Milo had never smelled, accents and languages he had never heard, and skin tones and styles of dress that he had never seen. It was many times busier than the busiest day in the busiest village back home. It so delighted Milo to see the city alive and in action. Trying not to get too distracted from all the morning hustle and bustle, Milo marched north to the smithing quarter. As he got closer, there came a change in the sounds and smells. The familiar smell of burning wood and charcoal filled the air. A faint clang, clang, clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoed off the walls. The smithing quarter was a city within the city, with its own walls, housing, food shops, security. It contained within its walls not only blacksmiths, silversmiths, and other metal workers, but also cobblers, coopers, shipbuilders, and other tradespeople. As Milo walked through its main gate, the hammering and the smoke became much more noticeable, eventually turning into a metallic symphony of pings, thuds, and dings. To his right, he saw 2 larger buildings with smokestacks coming out of them, which he assumed to be the smithing forges. Both forges had large signs in the front which read, "Not hiring at this time." At the second forge, a man was walking toward the front door, and Milo rushed over to talk to the man and asked, "Excuse me, sir, are any of the forges hiring here? Looking for help here?" There's one that might be. Straight back that way, said the man quickly before entering the building. Ask for Mr. Stark. Milo found himself in the quieter corner of the quarter. It was a modest building, smaller than the rest, but the flames within burned with a fierce intensity, casting a warm glow over the surrounding area. Sitting at a desk sat a man of formidable stature, grumbling and filling out a work order. The man peered up from his paperwork, happy to have an excuse to get away from it, even for a moment. He looked at he looked Milo over and spoke. What can I do for you, sir? Milo stood as tall as he could and spoke with all the confidence he could muster. My name is Milo, and I am looking for work. Pleased to meet you. I am Stark, said the man, his muscles bulging underneath the sleeves of his leather apron. You have any experience working with metal? Rumbled Stark in a deep voice. I ran a family-owned coppersmith business back home. Stark brought him around the shop and asked him a few technical questions, which Milo answered with skillful precision. After realizing Milo's understanding of the craft, they went back to the office. I think you'll fit right in here. The job pays 600 cedros a week. Be here early tomorrow morning, he said as he trudged back to his paperwork. And that ends chapter 1. And it's a half an hour, and it's going to take forever to upload. Thanks for listening.